Strange earthquakes in South Carolina traced to a man-made lake. Monticello Reservoir caused 3 earthquake swarms up to now. A series of small earthquakes northwest of Columbia, South Carolina, caused by a man-made lake built more than 40 years ago, according to geologists. The tiny tremblers, magnitude 2 and less, are jangling nerves near South Carolina's Lake Monticello, according to the state newspaper. But the earthquakes are not unprecedented. The reservoir set off a series of minor earthquakes when it was first filled in the late 1970s. Another small swarm occurred between 1996 and 1999. Since October 25th, there have been 7 earthquakes detected near the lake, according to South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. These quakes are so small that someone standing on the surface might only notice them if they were right over the epicenter and there was no rumbling traffic nearby. We have not had any large earthquakes at Monticello, said Pradeep Talwani, Professor Emeritus of Geology, University of South Carolina, who spent his career studying earthquakes caused by man-made lakes. Going all the way back to 1977, all of the earthquakes in the area have been less than magnitude 3, he said. Quakes under magnitude 3 are rarely felt. So this is reservoir-induced seismicity. What's happening at Lake Monticello is called reservoir-induced seismicity. This phenomenon happens in relatively few reservoirs around the world, Talwani told Life Science, and regardless of location, the physics are always the same. A reservoir is built over rocks that contain fluid-filled fractures. When more water is loaded on top, it seeps into the fractures. It causes the fluids to migrate and build up pressure. Ultimately, the pressure causes the rocks to split and rattle the surrounding earth. This is the same reason that pumping fluids into oil wells for the purpose of fracking can cause earthquakes. Mostly, these man-made earthquakes are small. Globally, only 3 reservoir-induced quakes with a magnitude of 6 or higher have ever occurred. Talwani said earthquake damage can vary based on local conditions and building materials, but a magnitude 6 earthquake is typically the line at which serious damage occurs, of course. These damaging earthquakes occurred at deep reservoirs with more than 328 feet, that's 100 meters of water. Talwani explains, in comparison, Lake Monticello is 89 feet, or 27 meters deep at its deepest. Talwani said compared to everything globally, Monticello is a little puddle. So we have to be alert and watching for earthquakes. It's been, however, a very well-monitored puddle. Researchers first learned about reservoir-induced seismicity in the 1960s in Denver, Colorado. Operators at a chemical weapons factory called the Rocky Mountain Arsenal drilled a deep well and began injecting waste fluid into what turned out to be highly fractured rock, triggering more than 700 earthquakes in 5 years, according to a 1966 article in the journal The Mountain Geologist. So scientists knew about the possibility of reservoir-triggered earthquakes by the time Monticello was constructed. Talwani and his team were already monitoring and studying small swarms at reservoirs such as Jocassee near the North Carolina-South Carolina border. Lake Monticello was constructed in the 1970s as a water source for the nearby Virgil C. Summer nuclear power plant. Because scientists already knew that reservoirs could produce earthquakes, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission required careful monitoring of seismicity in the area. So there's a nuclear power plant that this reservoir supplies the water for. Talwani's research group conducted most of this monitoring, which gave them a stunning detailed view of tiny earthquakes that would not normally be picked up by U.S. Geological Survey equipment. The lake has been the source of thousands of tiny quakes over the years, most far too subtle to be felt. The initial swarm of earthquakes after the reservoir filled was not surprising, but the quakes in the 1990s, 20 years after Lake Monticello was constructed, were a little more mysterious. Thanks to their detailed seismic monitoring, Talwani and his team were able to figure out what had happened. Over time, they found water from the lake had dissolved mineral caps, quote unquote, that had been sealing off fractures in the rock, and with these new fractures opening, water was able to move into them, again building up pressure and causing the rocks to slip. Something similar is probably happening at Monticello now to cause a new earthquake, Salwani said. However, it's impossible to say because the fine-grained seismic monitoring system is no longer in place. That means researchers can see only the largest quakes, not the minuscule ones that help them localize the origin of the seismicity. And Talwani said, now we have no idea what's going on because we just have one seismic station in that area. Well, maybe they should put on more concerning the nuclear power plant that this water is meant for. Now, researchers at the University of South Carolina may soon deploy more seismometers in the area. Hopefully they will, said Scott Howard, a state geologist at the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. The quakes are likely to peter out or continue at the current levels of magnitude, Howard said. Now, this is by Stephanie Pappas on Live Science. So this lake, as we said, has been made in order to supply water for the nearby nuclear power plant. And it's also causing earthquakes. That's not good. So please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Finally, support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.